The theme of today's sermon is love, loss, and the sacred path of grief on this Kippur day. On this Yom Kippur day, this sacred day of Kippur, this time of remembering and honoring loved ones, I find myself thinking back to my childhood. As a child, Kippur was always a mystery to me, as perhaps it was to many of you as well. I can still hear the rabbi's words on those Kippur mornings. Children and anyone not reciting Kippur, please rise and exit the sanctuary. And so we did, obedient children, along with a few quiet, anonymous adults, marching out of the sanctuary through the heavy wooden doors. On the other side of those doors, we wondered, what was happening in there? What prayers were being said? What emotions were unfolding? We knew that there was sadness. We sensed that tears were being shed. And we asked ourselves, why were we sent away? Were the adults afraid that their grief would overwhelm us? Did they want to shield us from pain? Did they want to protect us from the knowledge of loss? Looking back, I understand the impulse of our parents' generation to hold their feelings close and to protect us. And yet, I wonder if it might have been instructive for us, healthy for us as children, to see our parents cry, to witness that sorrow is not something to hide, but rather something holy, something human, something sacred. Today, we are the grown-ups, and still the world around us often urges us to push difficult feelings aside, especially grief. Our culture hurries past sorrow, distracting us, silencing us, pretending that loss can be neatly tucked away. But Judaism offers another path. Judaism is countercultural. Judaism, in its wisdom, insists that grief is not something to be denied, but something to be honored. Judaism teaches us that mourning is sacred, that grief, though painful, is holy, and that to feel it fully is in fact part of what it means to be deeply alive. Every one of us knows loss: a grandparent, a parent, a partner, a spouse, a friend, a child, a grandchild, a dream. Some of us are carrying grief that is very fresh and raw. Others have grief that has lived with us for decades, resurfacing in moments both expected and unexpected. Grief, we don't like to talk about it, but we all experience it. Judaism teaches us that grief is not something to move on from. Rather, grief is something to live with, something to integrate, something that in time evolves and transforms, and which has the possibility of transforming us. And as humans, we are bound together in this universal experience of loss and grief. The question before us is not if we will grieve in our lifetimes. Loss touches every human life. The question is, what will we do with our grief? Will we push it away? Will we pretend it isn't there? Or will we somehow learn to live with it in a way that allows us still to love, perhaps even more deeply, and to connect to others in their grief? From the very first chapters of Torah and throughout our Jewish texts, we see grief etched into the human story. Abraham mourns Sarah with tears and eulogies. Jacob rends his clothes and refuses comfort when he believes that his son Joseph is dead. Rachel in the book of Jeremiah weeps for her children, and she refuses to be comforted. Hannah in the book of Samuel pours out her tears in the temple, yearning for a child, until the priest Eli thinks that Hannah is drunk. Kohelet, Ecclesiastes, teaches there is a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance. Tehillim, Psalms 126, assures us, Those who sow in tears will reap in joy. And the Talmud in Tractate Brachot teaches, the gates of prayer may be closed, but the gates of tears are always open. The wisdom in these teachings is not that sorrow disappears, but that tears themselves help us to process our grief. Tears are holy. Tears are the language of the heart, an honest outpouring of our deepest love. Judaism reminds us again and again that grief is not the opposite of love, but it is rather love's purest expression. The more deeply we love, the more deeply we grieve. Some of our faith's deepest wisdom can be found in our Jewish rituals around grief and mourning. Every one of us has known loss, and again, friends and congregants express how profoundly meaningful and comforting our traditions' practices are. Among all of our Jewish rituals, those surrounding death are perhaps the most psychologically insightful and spiritually resonant. The rabbis understood what we all need when we are grieving: community, the embrace of comfort, and above all, the gift of time. Time to mourn and to grieve in our own time and at our own pace, not according to anyone else's timetable. When death of a loved one comes, we do not face it alone. We sit Shiva, days in which the community literally comes to our doorstep, bearing food and presents, helping us carry what we cannot carry alone. We mark Shloshim, 30 days when life begins to resume, but mourning still shapes us. We say Kaddish, not once, but day after day, week after week, giving rhythm to our grief. We light a yahrzeit candle because year after year, our love for our dear ones still burns bright. And on Yom Kippur and on the festivals, we gather for Yizkor, not to put grief away, but to take it out, to recite the names of our loved ones, and to allow our souls to merge with theirs. On a long car ride this summer to visit our children in Maine, as Elliot and I were searching for music or a new book to listen to, we instead discovered a podcast by Anderson Cooper entitled All There Is. This lovely and touching podcast addresses the delicate topic of grief. Anderson Cooper, a well-known broadcaster and journalist, has known grief for nearly his whole life. When he was just 10 years old, his father died. At 21, Anderson's brother Carter died by suicide. And in 2019, Anderson lost his mother, Gloria Vanderbilt, the last anchor of his family. For years, Anderson did what so many of us do. He tried to keep grief at bay. He threw himself into his work, into travel, into the constant rush of life, hoping that busyness might soften the ache. As he later admitted, I thought grief was something to be endured and hidden away. I believed if I kept moving, kept working, it would loosen its grip. But grief has a way of finding us. No matter how busy we are, no matter how fast we move, it waits for us. After his mother's death, Anderson was left with a task that many of us know too well: going through his mother's home, sorting through her belongings. He opened box after box, old letters, photographs, her clothing, even scraps of paper she had saved. And with each object, he felt again not only her absence, but also the absence of his father and his brother. The weight of it was overwhelming. To steady himself, Anderson began recording voice memos, just speaking out loud into the silence so that the pain would not engulf him. And those raw recordings, meant only to help him survive, became the seed of his podcast, All There Is. In his podcast, Cooper speaks with actors, poets, spiritual teachers, and friends like Ashley Judd, Will Reeve, Whoopi Goldberg, Molly Shannon, and grief expert Frances Waller. people who, like Anderson, have all known profound loss. What Anderson discovered and what his guests affirmed is that grief is not the opposite of love, but its companion, its partner. Grief does not shrink when shared. Rather, it expands into connection. As Cooper puts it, I thought I was the only one crying in the dark. Then I realized I was surrounded by people carrying their own grief. A special guest on Anderson's podcast, whose story really touched my heart, is actor Andrew Garfield, a handsome 42-year-old Jewish British American actor known for his roles in the Spider-Man movies and a recent movie, We Live in Time. When Garfield lost his beloved mother Lynn to cancer in 2019, his world was shattered. On Anderson's podcast, Garfield describes grief not as a void, but as a bridge to closeness. Only in that absence, really inhabiting that absence, that's the only moment she comes, he reflected about his mother Lynn. For Garfield, grief is not merely a reflection of loss. It's a path toward presence, a reminder that the wound is the only route to the gift, and that the grief and the loss are the only route to the vitality of being alive. Garfield explained that he hopes that his grief will stay with him because for him, his grief represents all the unexpressed love I didn't get to tell her. He also spoke about how his community became a source of strength during his darkest hours, describing how his friends created a net of love and care beneath him, filling the space that his mother once held. Another very powerful guest on All There Is late night show host Stephen Colbert. Stephen Colbert is known to most of us as a comedian and a wise social commentator. But behind Colbert's intelligence and wit is a story marked by loss. When Colbert was just 10 years old, his father and two of his brothers, Peter and Paul, were killed in a plane crash, a tragedy that left a permanent imprint on his life. Decades later, at age 61, Colbert still lives with grief, but at this stage in his life, Colbert has come to understand his grief as transformative. Colbert reflects, it's a gift to exist, and with existence comes suffering. Love and grief are a package deal. I can't separate the two. So I have learned to love the thing that I most wish had not happened. Colbert describes grief as shaping him into someone more tender, empathetic, and capable of offering comfort through humor and human connection. Colbert insists that to be fully human is to accept not only joy, but suffering, not only love, but loss. I want to be the most human I can be, says Colbert, and that involves acknowledging and ultimately being grateful for the things that I wish didn't happen because they gave me a gift. What a radical reframing of loss, not as a punishment to endure, but as an inseparable companion of love, a deepening of our humanity. Colbert and Cooper also speak about how sharing our grief transforms it. Quote, anger is an armor against how we actually feel, Colbert reflects. But if you can share your stories, that turns the cave into a tunnel. It adds oxygen to your life. This insight that speaking our grief aloud opens us echoes the wisdom of our Jewish tradition, which insists that mourning must be held in community, that we sit Shiva and recite Kaddish and Yizkor in community. What makes the conversation between Colbert and Cooper extremely powerful is the vulnerability between them. Two public figures, two men, setting aside their masks and speaking of heartbreak with tears in their eyes. It is a rare and precious thing in a culture that so often teaches us to armor ourselves with silence. And the impact has been enormous. Listeners to this episode of Anderson's podcast describe this conversation as compelling, exceptional, and utterly moving. Cooper's podcast has given people language and permission to grieve, reminding us that sorrow is not meant to be carried alone, but to be shared with others. That truth is not only found in the stories of public figures, it lives here among us too. Many of us here know and love Myra Sack, her parents, Sandy Scher and Michael Sack, and all of the wonderful Scher Sack family, who are cherished members of Or Zarua. Myra and her husband Matt's lives were changed forever when their dear firstborn daughter, Chavi Lev, died when she was just 2 years and 4 months old from Tay-Sachs disease. Rather than turning away from the depths of their grief, Myra and Matt turned towards it, holding all at once both the searing sorrow and the intense love for their dear Chavi Lev. During the first several months following Chavi Lev's passing, I had the privilege of speaking regularly with Myra, discussing Jewish views of death and dying and the journey of the souls of our loved ones who truly always remain with us. We were so honored here at Or Zarua on Yom Kippur a few years ago when Myra shared with us her personal story about what it means to live with deep loss. Out of their heartbreak, Myra and Matt founded Emotion, a nonprofit organization that helps children and families facing profound illness and loss to find healing through movement, expression, and community. Myra has also written the memoir 57 Fridays, in which she tells the story of Chavi's life and chronicles the rituals that she, Matt, and their family created to keep Chavi Lev's neshama present in their lives. Each Friday in the Sack Goldstein family was and is a Shabbat, a Shabbat gathering in joy and remembrance, bringing music, play, and light into their home, so that grief is not only about absence, but is also about continuing relationship and love that lives on forever. Through these rituals, Myra's writing, Emotion, and the Sack Goldstein's shared activism, Myra and Matt are such role models and mensches, showing us that grief can be transformed into a force for good in the world, a way of loving that does not end, but continues to ripple outward, touching countless lives. I find Myra and Matt's story, together with the stories of Anderson Cooper, Stephen Colbert, Andrew Garfield, to be so profoundly moving. By opening their hearts and sharing their grief, each one of these individuals is performing an act of great chesed, loving kindness. In their vulnerability, they are drawing people together. They remind us of our shared humanity and of the truth that grief and loss are woven into every life. What unites all of their voices is a simple but powerful wisdom. Grief is not weakness. Grief is essential. Grief is love. Grief declares, this person mattered. This love mattered. This life mattered. And so, as we enter this new year of 5786, carrying with us the memories of those we love and miss, let us not push our grief aside. Let us honor our grief. Let us allow our grief to open us, to soften us, to deepen us. Our grief reminds us that our hearts are alive, that love endures, and that every tear we shed is sacred. For grief in the end is not only about what or whom we may have lost, it is about what we continue to carry forward. The laughter that still echoes in our hearts, the stories, teachings, and blessings we continue to share, the courage, tenderness, and generosity that we bring into the world because of those we have loved and who have loved us. In this new year of 5786, may our grief teach us to live more fully, to love more openly, and to act more justly. May our grief turn memory into blessing, sorrow into strength, and absence into a presence that guides and sustains us. And may we, each of us carrying both love and loss, step into this new year with hearts wide and capacious enough to hold both our grief and our joy, knowing that both grief and joy are holy, sacred, and the truest expressions of the soul. May we be blessed with the courage to grieve, the wisdom to remember, and the love that carries those we miss into every moment of our lives. Gamar Chatima Tova. Together we say.